The Stone Man, a science fiction horror novel by Luke Smitherd. The blurb on the back reads, "Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knew why it came. Even so, for 2-Bit, an antisocial reporter, Andy Pointer, the appearance in his city of a man made of moving stone meant the scoop of a lifetime. He would soon learn that the Stone Man was much more, and much worse, than that." This is Andy's account of everything that came afterwards, and the people that were lost along the way, of the terrible price that he and the rest of the country had to pay, the destruction, the visions, the dying. I purchased this book on a whim, not having read anything by Luke Smitherd before, but the reviews were positive and spoke of an interesting tale. The book starts when a large figure made of stone appears in Coventry city centre. At first, people are intrigued as they believe it to be some Banksy-esque piece of modern art, but that intrigue turns to terror when the Stone Man starts to walk and doesn't stop, destroying everything in its path as it heads towards an unknown destination. The story is told from the point of view of Andy, a struggling reporter who happens to be there to see the Stone Man's arrival and first steps. Believing he can get the scoop of a lifetime, Andy attempts to follow the Stone Man and document its journey. But it soon becomes apparent that the Stone Man is doing more than just walking, and that Andy's link to the Stone Man extends far beyond that of just a reporter taking photographs. This link gives Andy a front row seat to one of the most important events in the history of mankind. I won't go any further into the plot for spoiler reasons, as I feel that this book is best read with little understanding of the events that are taking place. I like the originality of the premise. It's imaginative, and any preconceived notions I had of where the story would take us were not met as it moved down a path I had not expected. How many films or books have we all seen that tell the same story of a strange being or alien's arrival, and then go on to give us a by-the-numbers tale of the ensuing battle? The Stone Man is different in this regard, as it plays out more like a mystery that needs to be solved. The main character, Andy, is well written, but not very likeable. More often than not, he is thinking only about himself and taking advantage of any situation to advance his career or social status. This did get annoying at points, but it did lead me to asking the same questions of myself. If I was in Andy's situation, would I have also been looking out for number one? We all like to think that we will be the selfless hero, but I'm not sure we all would be when faced with the choice. The other characters are also well written enough to fulfill their roles. Scientists, military personnel and friends. The only other character that we get to know well is Paul, who has the same link to the Stone Man as Andy and joins him on his journey. Paul is a bit more likeable, and his views are often juxtaposed to Andy's, as Paul is for the most part considerate of those around him and not basing all of his decisions on career advancement. The two characters work well together, and their opposing viewpoints do force you as the reader to consider their various arguments and decide which action you think is correct. The book has a nice pace as the story moves steadily forward, much like The Stone Man itself. I found the beginning a little difficult to get through, as you are confronted with what seems like a wall of never-ending text with few breaks, but once I was a few pages in, this no longer bothered me. The book also shifts perspective about 3/4 into a third-person perspective before switching back to a different first-person perspective, which I found a bit jarring. But given the events of the book, I can appreciate why this happened, but feel it possibly could have been handled a little bit better. The book calls itself a science fiction horror novel. Most of my way through the book, I wasn't sure of this, as I found it largely to be science fiction, with some small horror elements thrown in. The Stone Man himself, for example, is a scary concept, but not enough to claim it was a horror novel. In fact, there were points when I thought that the book might move into hard science fiction. However, it never made this leap, and is better for it. The horror does arrive in the last few chapters, however, and is largely based around the sheer inevitability of the events that are taking place. This works twofold, as the story takes a turn, which presents one of the characters with a completely different type of horrific inevitability. The ending itself is then somewhat open-ended and unresolved, but this didn't bother me. I felt this worked well with the horror elements that came later and with the certainty of what was to happen. The author does provide an alternative ending in the afterword, but personally, I preferred the original ending. Like I said, this was my first Luke Smitherd book, and I have to say I enjoyed it enough that I will consider picking up another. I've heard that The Physics of the Dead is worth a read. If I was going to rate the book, I would say 7.5 out of 10. Very enjoyable, very imaginative, with a story that is intriguing and plausible. And living in the Midlands, it was nice to see such high-profile, world-changing events take place in Coventry. Have you guys read The Stone Man? Let me know what you thought in the comments. And have you read any of Luke Smitherd's other books? Are there any that you would recommend? Thanks for listening.